Good morning. I'm Pat Dale, your fire chief here at Grande Fire Rescue. Today we're here for virtual coffee with the fire chief. Questions and answers with myself. We're glad to host any questions that you have. Please type in your questions and we'll be glad to discuss those and talk about them. Virtual coffee with the fire chief. I have what's one of my favorite coffee mugs here, Mickey Mouse coffee cup that we got as a family in Walt Disney World when my child was a lot younger. One of my favorite coffee mugs. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, again, thanks for joining us. I want to just kind of talk about our fire department here, Grande Fire Rescue. It's also known as Fire District 21. Pierce County Fire District 21, interchangeable with Grande Fire Rescue. So that comes up as a question frequently. We were founded in 1962, formed as a junior taxing district known as Fire District 21, and we've taken on the name of Grande Fire Rescue as it relates to the geographic area that we cover, which is actually 70 square miles. We serve a population base of about 70,000 people, and I'd like you to know that in 2018 we responded to almost 7,000 calls, which continue to grow with the population growth. Our call volume continues to be on the rise. So I have a question from Scott, and Scott's question is, does Grande Fire Rescue still have volunteers? Thanks for that question, Scott. And yes, we do. We're actively recruiting volunteers. We have a workforce that's rising with volunteers and residents. Mostly our volunteers are a model of resident firefighters that help in our staffing. So I'd like you to know that on our website, you can go onto our website and let us know that you would like to become a volunteer. Currently, we're not actively bringing on volunteers for an academy, but we continually take names in and we'll reach out to you when we do have an academy, which is about once a year. So yes, we're still growing our volunteer and volunteer resident contingent. Thanks for that question, Scott. Hope you're interested and hope to see your name on our website. So back to a little bit more about our fire district. What do we do on a daily basis here? Well, we have a minimum staffing of 19 firefighters and firefighter paramedics on duty 24/7, 365, 7 days a week. And we deliver our service to address points when people call 911 for fire or emergency medical service. We deliver our service mostly in big red fire trucks. And the fire trucks mitigate fire calls and become engaged and work with the community, and they do so much more that I'm going to talk about as we go along. We also have prevention service that we provide to our citizens. Our main mission is that your safety is our number one priority. Emergency medical services, which make up about 78% of our call volume, is another service that we deliver. And again, it's mostly what we do at this day and age. So our emergency medical service is divided into two major categories, those being basic life support needs. So when you call 911, there's a triage that takes place from a call receiving dispatcher, and they'll dispatch calls as basic life support. So all of our firefighters are EMTs, and EMTs are the ones that provide that service for falls, breaks, strains, sprains, and those sort of basic life support needs. And our EMTs on big red trucks will respond to mitigate those emergencies. The second category then is advanced life support that we deliver with our highly trained paramedics. They're trained to another advanced level, starting IVs, providing medicine and airway management, and that's mostly on medic units. So we have another question in from Justine, And Justine's question is, are the paramedics firefighters trained in pediatric medical emergencies? And the answer is yes. Great question, Justine. We'd like you to know that our EMTs and medics are trained in and trained frequently in pediatric medical emergencies among all of the other medical services that we provide. In fact, today is a Monday, and I'd like to let you know that Mondays here at Grande Fire Rescue are referred to as Medical Mondays. So every Monday we engage in advanced and continuing education for all of our EMTs and paramedics. Thanks for that question, Justine. Back to more information about our fire district as we're waiting for more questions to come in. Still talking about our emergency medical service that we provide, which again is mostly what we provide. 78% of our call volume is medical calls. And another service that we provide is transport to hospitals. So after arriving, treating patients, triaging, and determining if there's a need for a transport, we do provide that service. And I'd also like you to know that for portions that insurance don't cover, we do not bill our qualified residents and citizens for that transportation service. Along with the types of calls I've mentioned, another significant call volume for us in the area of emergency medicine is motor vehicle accidents, unfortunately. We respond to numerous motor vehicle accidents which are actually a high-risk incident for us to engage in just because of the nature of our 70 square miles and the crossroads, narrow country roads, and high speeds. Significant number of motor vehicle accidents. And again, they can be high risk for us, which is why you'll see a number of emergency vehicles respond to a single motor vehicle accident because of that high risk. We bring a lot of our resources and again, big red fire trucks to protect our firefighters and EMTs and medics while they treat and prepare for transport patients from motor vehicle accidents. What else do we do here at Grande Fire Rescue? Well, we do have surface water rescue capabilities. We deliver that service with a boat that we have that's housed down at our most southern station, Station 93 in our southern portion of our district. We have Lake Kapowsin that's served with that boat. Another area that we deliver service in, not so frequently, but is hazardous material response. We're part of, and in fact currently a lead agency for the Pierce County Hazardous Incident Response Team. So we have, again, another level of training that many of our firefighters, EMTs, and medics are trained to be a part of that hazardous incident response team. Another area that we engage in is wildland firefighting. As you know, we had a quarterly newsletter where we sent out information that we thought would be valuable for our citizens. As we came into the summer that's now behind us, as we move into fall, we were predicting a large call volume of wildland fires, which thankfully didn't really realize to the level that we were predicting. So in our last quarterly newsletter, we included 10 useful bullet points of information on how to create what we call defensible space at your residential property, so that in a fast-moving, wind-driven type of wildland fire, that the growth wouldn't aid in spreading the fire to the structures on your property. So please, if you didn't take a look, go back and look at that quarterly newsletter and useful information about that. So we see we have another question in from Colton. And Colton asks a good question, I see. Colton asks, I have a Puyallup address. What is it that Grande Fire and Rescue responds? Why is it that Grande Fire and Rescue responds to my house? So Colton, great question. This is a question that comes up frequently, and I'll attempt to answer it as simply as I can. I started out the the session here mentioning that we were formed in 1962 as a fire district, District 21, again interchangeable with Grande Fire and Rescue. And as our area, while the 70 square miles remains the same, of course our population growth since 1962 has been enormous. And while the citizens move out from the city of Puyallup into unincorporated Pierce County, which is what we are made up of, mostly Graham and Compowson, those zip codes, as they become part of our area that we serve in the 70 square miles, some of those have become Puyallup zip codes. You still remain within our 70 square miles of service delivery area, and so that's how a Puyallup zip code and address on your envelope becomes served by Grande Fire and Rescue, Fire District 21. I hope I answered your question, Colton. Thanks for that question, because it's something that comes up frequently, and again, thank you. So I'll continue while we're waiting for more questions. We have some great questions so far, and looking forward to some more of those coming in. In the meantime, I'll continue with the work that our members here, firefighters and paramedics, the service that they deliver. Public education is another area that we're engaged in, and that we are currently going to be engaging in more. I'll take a pause from the public education description I was starting to talk about and let you know that you'll notice on our website that we currently have a recruitment process open for a brand new position here at Grande Fire and Rescue, and that's a community outreach officer. Please look at our website. It's currently open, I believe, until about the first week of November, or until filled. So we're excited about this new position for community outreach, and we want to enhance that by a large margin so that we can engage with the citizens in our community for education and ensuring that your safety is our #1 priority. So again, take a look at our website, new recruitment for community outreach officer, public education. All right. Questions. Awaiting some more questions from viewers this morning. Now, another thing that I'd like to inform you of is we currently have, for the November 5th ballot, there's a Board of Fire Commissioners seat that's open, and there are 2 people running for that open commissioner's seat, so look for that on the November 5th ballot. And I might back up to the beginning and talking about the formation of our district and just sort of how we're governed. We are governed by a Board of Fire Commissioners. We have a 5-member commission board. They provide governance and oversight and financial oversight for the district. Our Board of Fire Commissioners meets twice a month. They meet on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of each month at 6:30 p.m. right here at Grande Fire and Rescue headquarters on 70th Avenue. So that's part of how our district is managed. I see that we have another question in. This question is from Hunter. And Hunter asks, a good question I see, if Proposition 1 is passed, how do you plan to use the money? So to frame an answer for Hunter's excellent question, I'd like to let everyone know, first of all, that on the general election November 5th ballot, we do have a measure from Grande Fire and Rescue, and that is Proposition 1. Proposition 1 is intended to ask our citizens whether or not they would like to maintain our emergency medical service levy, one of the levies by which we're funded, and we're going to ask whether they would approve or not the maintenance of EMS, emergency medical service levy. So that would amount to maintaining that 50 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value to continue. This levy was previously approved by our citizens a number of years ago as a permanent levy. It's framed as a Proposition 1, a levy lid lift, which is, again, to maintain that 50 cents per thousand. As our assessed value grows, the amount that we collect becomes less than 50 cents, and in fact in 2020 will become 40 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value. So we're going to ask to lift that statutory limit of 1% per year, and that's how they come up with the term lid lift, to lift that cap and allow the full collection of that 50-cent levy. So the question now that I've framed the question from Hunter is, what do we plan to use the money for? So again, to tie this in with our growing fire district, our population has grown immensely since 2011, and in fact our call volume, along with the increase in population, necessarily the calls for service has increased 33% since 2011. So that increase in population and associated call volume is outpacing our ability to deliver the service to the address points. So the money will stay local. It only goes to Grande Fire Rescue, Fire District 21, for the purpose of apparatus, equipment, and supplies to deliver that emergency medical service. So it does stay local within Grande Fire and Rescue, and it will be used for delivery of our medical services to address points. Thanks for that question, Hunter. Great question. I see we have another question in now. This one's from Dylan. And Dylan asks, how does our funding compare to other fire departments? Great question, Dylan. So our funding, in comparison to, I'll have a discussion about neighboring fire departments, which are those departments which touch our borders on the 70 square miles that we serve. And to answer it most directly and succinctly, I would describe it as actually on the low end of our neighboring fire districts, those that touch our border. Our total funding, mostly our funding comes from, I've already mentioned, an emergency medical service levy. That's one of the forms of revenue that we receive. Another one is a fire levy at $1.50 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. So those are two. Currently, we're on a maintenance and operation levy that the voters approved beginning in this year, 2019. So those are the three major sources of our funding for our fire district. And in total cost, those three levies are actually on the low end of what our neighboring fire districts are collecting. So thank you for that question, Dylan. I hope I answered your question directly. Great question. And as we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I'm actually going to have a little coffee from one of my favorite coffee mugs. All right. More about Grande Fire and Rescue, District 21. And I'll collect my thoughts. We, thank you for the help. And also describing our fire district, I did not mention that within the 70 square miles, we have 6 fire stations. So we have 5 stations that are staffed with the EMT, firefighter EMTs and medics that I've talked about. Our career staff members staff 5 of our fire stations, and that's where that minimum daily staffing that I mentioned is 19 on a daily basis. And then we also have a volunteer station on our southern border of our fire district. That's Station 92 is a volunteer fire station. So a total of 6 stations in the 70 square miles. 5 are career staffed, and 1 which is a volunteer staffed fire station. All right, and as I've mentioned, the daily staffing of 19, which we have just recently raised from a couple years ago, and reason that we were able to raise our minimum staffing was due to the maintenance and operations levy that our citizens approved in the year 2018. So last year they approved that maintenance and operations levy, and I had promised our citizens that we would increase our staffing, fund apparatus and equipment replacement, and I'm happy to report that in just a short period of time, about a year and a half, we've actually hired 18 new firefighters to increase our minimum to the current level of 19. So I'm proud and want to let you know that we were able to do as we said we were going to do with increasing staffing. And we are funding an apparatus and equipment replacement plan also from that maintenance and operations levy. Okay, I see another question. Next question is from Gina. And Gina asks, what is Grande Fire Rescue doing for our first responders' mental health? Wow, what a great question, Gina. What a deep question. I want to answer this one by starting out to let you know that I have about 37 years of service in the fire service locally. That's, of course, not all with Grande Fire Rescue here. But the reason I mention the years of service that I have is it's really evolved since I started in 1982 to have more awareness, and I'm so thankful that our service is becoming more aware of the cost of the calls that we go on and what that does to our members. There's sometimes difficult calls that our members are asked to engage in, and we're recognizing that can build up and be a heavy weight on our members' mental health. So in recognizing that, I feel that we're on the front end of the fire service really nationally in engaging a program that we call peer support. And I support it 100%, and we are engaging with that program, peer support, where our members look to help each other and recognize when our own members are having difficulty. And then as an organization, we support having our members get help when they're struggling. So what a great question, Gina. I hope I answered your question. Thank you for that. As I answer that one, I see that we have more. I want to also, before I leave the question from Gina, which was such a great question, and go back and talk about the peer support program, and just let you know that our teams, they provide support for our other team members, and we call up that group when we recognize that there's been a difficult call, and they actually deploy in sort of a new model and help our members sort of one-on-one, and again, where the name's derived from, a peer support and help from peers that can really speak to their potential problems that they're having. So again, it's a new program. I think we're sort of on the front end of ourselves and other departments engaging in that. And now I see that there's another question, a different topic from Eric. And Eric asks, why do you need a lid lift? So Eric, you may have just tuned in. I've talked about just a little while ago the lid lift on our emergency medical service levy. It's sort of a funny term, the lid lift, but it really comes from a previous statutory legislative move that puts a lid or a cap on when our assessed value grows. There's a 1% annual increase only that can be captured on our emergency medical service levy. And as it drops, as I had mentioned earlier, our 50 cents in 2020, as assessed value goes up, the rate drops, and in 2020 we'll be at 40 cents instead of the 50. So there's an allowance by law that we can ask the citizens whether or not they would approve raising that cap or lifting the lid, is where it comes from, to maintain that 50 cents per $1,000 of assessed value that previously our citizens had voted for a permanent levy. So we're just asking to lift that cap and maintain the 50 cents of the permanent EMS levy. Eric, great question. I hope that I was able to answer that for you. All right. So I want to get back to describing the service that our wonderful members here at Grande Fire Rescue provide on a daily basis. And I want to take not a sharp left turn, sort of a left turn. And I want to tell you a short story. I did mention I have about 37 years in the fire service, but honestly only about 2.5 of those have been as a member here at Grande Fire Rescue, which I'm so proud to be here. It's a special organization. As I came here about 2.5 years ago, an interesting story as I was shown around to all of our 6 stations that I mentioned earlier within our fire district. As we came across Station 96, one of our members told me that while our members take care of the lawns and mow the grass in a rather large lot that we have at Station 96, they took me out back and I was able to see a solution that our firefighters came up with to maintaining lawn at Station 96, and that was Drip, Torch, and Frankie. 3 goats that are within a fenced area for the purpose of keeping the grass down. So I took sort of a liking to our fire goats. I think it's unique to Grande Fire Rescue that we have fire goats, Drip, Torch, and Frankie, and they actually serve a wonderful purpose. I want to let you know that they were acquired by one of our members. Our members actually take it upon themselves to take up donations, and they also use a goat fund me to help buy food, especially during the winter months when the grass isn't growing so much. So I wanted to take a little left turn and let you know that a unique aspect of Grande Fire Rescue is we have fire goats. You can see the fire goats. If you didn't happen to go to our last open house, we had our fire goats present. You'll likely see our fire goats at our next open house that you can look for in the spring of 2020. All right, I see a question from Eric has come in. So let's see what Eric has in mind. With all the current growth in the area, what does that mean for response times? Great question, Eric. So our service that we deliver is time-sensitive, staff-intensive, and highly technical in nature, which is the way I would describe our fire service. So one of those components was time-sensitive. It's really critical for fire that we insert ourselves in an out-of-control, a fire that's out of control in a building. It's crucial that we insert ourselves for mitigation, in other words, to suppress and control an out-of-control fire. Fires grow in a quick manner in the first several minutes and continue to grow exponentially. So the sooner that we can engage and suppress and control an out-of-control fire, the better it is for everyone involved. At the same time, response times are critical for medical calls. The sooner that we can engage in life-saving intervention, the more likely there is for survival by our patients. So I just wanted to frame that to begin with, response times are a critical, very critical piece of the service that we deliver. And yes, Eric, with all the current growth in the area, the response times are affected in a couple different ways. One of those is that the population rises, so does our call volume. The calls for service necessarily increases, like I had described earlier, 33% increase since the year 2011. So the way that affects our response times in one way is that our units are engaged in increased calls, and while other calls come in, we have units that have to come from one of those 6 stations from a farther distance, so that increases response time. And the other way that it increases response time is that just the volume of traffic and population, and as our corridors and centers get built out, it starts resembling more of an urban area, and we need to catch up with our funding and staffing to catch up with that urban look that we have in Grande Fire and Rescue with our sort of rural changing to urban fire department. So I hope I answered your question, Eric. That growth does affect our response times definitely in those ways I described. Thanks for the question. I see we have another question just in from Ben. And I see Ben has a question that says, I see firefighters shopping in the store. Are they on duty and who pays for the food that they buy? Great question, Ben. Thank you for asking that. So when you see a big red truck parked at, or a medic unit parked at a grocery store, those members are on duty. As I described, we deliver our service 24/7, 365. So your safety is our number one priority and we staff accordingly. So that necessarily means that our firefighters have a unique work schedule. They live at the fire station for 24-hour periods at a time. And many times in order to have the meals that they need while on duty for 24 hours, they'll go to a grocery store, shop for food. I want you to know that they pay for their own food from their own pockets. That's not paid for by Fire District 21, Grande Fire and Rescue. And I'll let you know that I've also seen, for example, at the center of our district at the Safeway at Grande Fire and Rescue, our firefighters, while shopping, have engaged in conversations and with children and citizens, and I've seen them answer these very same questions that I'm getting here in this fun time we're having with virtual coffee. That's a great interface and interaction that our members get to have with the citizens of our community while they're getting the food that they bring back and prepare during their 24-hour shift. Ben, thanks for that question. I hope I was able to answer that for you. Speaking of virtual coffee, coffee from one of my favorite mugs. So I see that we're at a point where I'm going to take a final question. And that final question is from Jill. And Jill asks, why do you send a fire engine to medical calls? So Jill, great question. Boy, do we get asked this question a lot. As I had described earlier, the makeup of our department is a couple levels of emergency medical service delivery. And one of those is our Firefighter EMTs that mostly are on big red fire trucks. So all of our firefighters are trained to a minimum level of emergency medical technician, and that is the basic life support service delivery. So that's the first level, I'll describe it. And they're trained as firefighters and at the same time as emergency medical technicians. So we deliver our medical service in a dual role. And so you see that 78% of our calls are emergency medical services and a smaller number are for fires. So instead of having firefighters only as firefighters and engage in a lower number of fire suppression type incidents, we engage them in responding to the basic life support on big red trucks, that 78% of our call volume. So our firefighter EMTs serve that dual role of fire control and also basic life support emergency medical service delivery. Okay, Jill, I hope that's a great question, and I hope I was able to answer that for you. So in sort of a wrap up and to conclude, if you like this virtual coffee time with me today, let us know. We look forward to future sessions. I've certainly enjoyed this. I want to remind our citizens about those Board of Fire Commissioners meetings that I mentioned. I will mention sort of an interesting point tonight, Monday, October 21st, is a special board meeting. There will not be one this Wednesday, but throughout the year, our Board of Fire Commissioner meetings are the second and fourth Wednesday, except for this week, at 6:30 p.m. here at Grande Fire and Rescue headquarters. I want to remind you also in closing that there is a general election on November 5th, and on that we will have an open seat for Board of Fire Commissioner, and also We are asking the citizens whether or not they will maintain that EMS levy by lifting the lid and allowing the maintenance of the 50 cents per thousand. That will be on the ballot also. In closing, I want to thank you for this virtual time. Great questions that we had today. The questions were a wonderful way for us to let you know about the service that we provide. And speaking of the service, your safety is our #1 priority.